Thanks for staying with us. So, this morning we'll be discussing our thoughts on the report of the Judicial Panel of Inquiry on the defunct Special Anti-Robbery Squad. That's hashtag EndSARS. Joining us on the show for this conversation is Barrister Ihibehe Effiong. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Maria.
It's always a pleasure having you on the show.
My pleasure to be here.
All right, so Nigerians have been talking about this report, and while reviewing the report, we heard from the Lagos State government that a four-man committee will be set up to put together a white paper. As a lawyer, I want you to help Nigerians understand the necessity of this, because we'll come to the report, but why is there a need for a white paper after a report such as this has been released to the public?
Thank you. The constitution of a committee, or a white paper committee, to review the report submitted by the panel of inquiry is not eccentric, it's not strange in itself. It is something that happens regularly, all the time. Usually when a panel is constituted, or the governor impanels a committee to inquire into a particular subject under the Tribunals of Inquiry law of Lagos State or any other law in the state, any other state, upon the completion of his assignment, that panel submits a report, which is advisory in nature, which makes recommendation, note the word recommendation, to the government. The panel of inquiry does not implement the findings and the recommendations. It is left at the discretion of the convening authority, in this case, the governor of Lagos State. Now, what the white paper committee is usually expected to do is to look at the report as submitted and come out with the position of the government on it.
Okay.
In terms of implementation, because as I said, the panel of inquiry does not implement.
Right.
And we must also say that ordinarily, the recommendations of the committee are advisory. It is not, strictly speaking, binding on the convening authority.
Ah.
Yes. It is not binding. It is a recommendation.
Yes.
Because executive power is domiciled in the governor, not in the panel.
Right.
The reason why this has become controversial is principally because in this instance, the Lagos State government and the governor of Lagos State are interested parties in the inquiry for which this report has been submitted. So people are now saying, well, that looking at even the membership of the White Paper Committee, which essentially comprises of commissioners, the Attorney General, the Commissioner for Youths, and so on, people are asking, is the government not being a judge in his own case? Wouldn't it have been better? Wouldn't it have served the purpose of natural justice and impartiality to have the membership of that White Committee totally insulated from the government? I think that is the fear that people are expressing.
How can people who are not empowered to give that sort of position be a part of that panel? Because it's a government decision. You told us that external parties have recommended. It's now left for the government, use their discretion, right, to now do how put all the documents or white paper on how we're going to implement. So why would people who are not part of government be part of that white paper? That's my bit of confusion.
No, they can't, because even the panel of inquiry itself had representative of the Lagos State government. In fact, the secretary of that panel, I think, was an official of the Lagos State Ministry of Justice. The Lagos State government was also part of the panel. It was represented by a council. I also appeared at that panel at some point when they started their findings. I was one of those who joined the team to represent the victims of the Lekki tollgate incident. So what we are saying is that when you now set up a white paper committee, the white paper committee is not required to necessarily do a fresh inquiry. Let's not be mistaken. They are not going to call fresh evidence. They are not going to examine further witnesses. They are not going to review documents. All they are supposed to do is to say, okay, we have seen this recommendation. Regarding this, this is how to implement it. Regarding the renaming of Lekki tollgate, for example, to EndSARS tollgate, this is accepted by government. So that white paper must clearly state what is accepted.
I'll come to you. I'm sorry, but I want to stay on this for a little bit, because why would I not trust a governor who has put together a panel of inquiry, have come up with this report that many of us have commended, to also put together another panel for the white paper? Why is that an issue? Why are people now worried if this four-man panel would actually be fair or would do a good job. So if the panel did a good job on the recommendation, why am I then questioning or second guessing what this former panel would do? That's the same authority.
For me, ultimately, I think history will, clearly apportion responsibility on this, because the reason why people are apprehensive, as I said, is that, take for example, if there is a gas explosion in Lagos, like I think it happened yesterday. Yeah. The government now constitutes a panel of inquiry to examine the remote and immediate causes of that explosion. Ordinarily, you cannot strictly say, oh, this is the fault of the Lagos state government. It could have been due to an act of God. It could have been due to natural occurrence. It could have been due to carelessness on the part, of a tanker driver or whatever. But when you have an incident where a panel has said it was the governor who invited the military to invade the tollgate, indicting the state governor. So let us wait. Okay. Maybe we should give the Governor Sanwo-Olu some benefit of doubt. Let us see what the white paper is going to say.
All right, let me come to the ladies.
You've already hinted at where the next question will go to, which is, what do you think about these recommendations of this report? What was your first opinion? Some people felt like they shouldn't have been public, but what do you think of these recommendations that this report has brought up, and how do you believe it should be implemented? I'm asking you to do white paper's job, but...
No, I was not surprised with the recommendations made, because if you look at the membership of that panel of inquiry, it was generally constituted by people of proven integrity. You had Learned Senior Advocate Babajide Sanwo-Olu, a man who has a long history of fighting for the common people. You had very credible people in that panel, so I had no fears. And the evidence were uncontested. I was part of that process. The evidence was clear and unequivocal. So when they came up with these recommendations, I was very impressed, especially on the vexed question of whether there was a massacre or not. The panel didn't leave it elusive. The panel came clearly to take a position on that matter. Now, what will now happen to implementation? I don't want Nigerians to be carried away, because, like we say, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. To begin with, we must admit that the governor and the government of Lagos State does not have 100% power to implement recommendations of that panel. There are aspects of the panel's recommendation that must necessarily be implemented by the president and the federal government, especially the one pertaining to the conduct of the military. Because if you look at the Constitution, Section 218 of the Constitution, the operational use of the armed forces is vested in the President and Commander-in-Chief. Will the federal government be able? Are they even willing to implement it? I am not optimistic. And why am I saying I'm not optimistic? In 2016, we had a massacre in Kaduna State in Zaria, where Burata's convoy was obstructed by members of the Islamic Movement of Nigeria. At the end of the day, 348 persons were killed, as found by the Justice Mohammed Garba-led panel of inquiry. Has it been implemented? The answer is no. Has anybody been put on trial? The answer is no. Was anybody dismissed? The answer is no. So why would we now expect that this is going to be different? Time will determine whether I am right or not.
Let me go on a break. This is an interesting angle. Let me go on a quick break. When we come back, we continue this conversation. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your view will be right back.
Thanks for staying with us. We're still discussing the Judicial Panel of Inquiry report. Yes, BC had a question for the break.
Yes, so I'm glad that you touched on the problems of implementation. Across the country, we have recommendations, but we find there's no political will to implement some of these recommendations. What would happen if, at the end of this white paper, and the government, whether it's the federal government or the state government, fails to implement some of these recommendations? What should the people now do?
It will be an invitation for another EndSARS. It's as simple as that. You see, my concern is that we have a leadership in this country that does not learn from history. In 2018, the National Human Rights Commission went around the 6 geopolitical zones to investigate cases of abuses by SARS. That panel indicted several SARS operatives, even recommended prosecution of a number of them. When they submitted their reports, it was thrown into the dustbin of history. When EndSARS happened, That was when the Attorney General of the Federation suddenly woke up and said, oh, that there's a recommendation, there's a report by the National Human Rights Commission. Till date, it has not been implemented. No police officer, no former SARS operative have been put on trial on account of that report. Some of these persons kill people, many people, cases of missing individuals, like the Awuza SARS, nothing has been done. So what I'm saying is that when you have a country where impunity is an official policy of states, it is very difficult to tell Nigerians or to tell citizens that they cannot come out to protest. Because what really led to the EndSARS?
Let's stay on the report for a moment. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, so talking about the white paper as well, I wonder because, you know, one of the major things concerning the whole EndSARS, what happened and the aftermath was even acknowledging that there were deaths at the toll gate. So in presenting this white paper, would it include an acknowledgement of that? Or should it? And also an apology about that, you know? And then the recommendations that the state government can carry out will begin. Just as you said, there's some things that the federal government has to do. So that if that is done, would that in some way begin to, you know, quell tension and, you know, different emotions, so that also people trust that government is on the way to, you know, mending all that has, you know, that has happened.
Right. It is very important for me as a sign of good faith. That is why I'm saying maybe we should give the governor some modicum of benefit of doubt to see whether he will live up to his promises. To begin with, I do not understand why offering an apology should be difficult. It is the simplest of the recommendations. I also do not see any challenge in renaming the toll gate or saying that 20th of October every day should be a toll-free day. I also do not see any challenge in compensating victims. Even some have already been compensated. So these recommendations are implementable. There is nothing complicated about these recommendations. The government must acknowledge that people were killed. In fact, they have already acknowledged by the findings of the committee. It was set up by the government. They must go further to now state unequivocally that we committed a crime against the youths of this country. Because this is why this is important. The incident of the toll gate, for me, was the most virulent attack on patriotism. Yes. When you are saying people should not fight for Biafra, and you kill them, you say people should not fight for Duduwa Republic, and you detain some Igbo and kill some of his supporters. And those who are fighting for Nigeria, singing the national anthem, raising the national flag, were shot and killed. So what do you want? Don't fight for Biafra, don't fight for Duduwa, don't also fight for Nigeria. The government must take a position. So when you attack people for singing the national anthem of their country, that was an atrocity against Nigeria.
There's still a gray area that I think I need clarity, and I'd like you to help me here. We've seen quite a bit of unrest in the southeast, where it seems like the security forces were overwhelmed by hoodlums. And many people were advising the government or the governors of the state to invite the military to support, to help to reinforce, to help secure lives and property. Number one. Number two, we've seen how volatile elections have been, where we're calling the military to help support, to ensure that there's sanity. Thirdly, this same time, October 20th last year, we saw the military come also to Ikeja. The same governor asked for reinforcement because we all saw the burning of tires, the destruction of properties, where it was as law and order were broken down in Lagos State. And as a governor, he called for reinforcement. Please, I need help. Now, is that a crime? Because now they're saying, oh, because he called for the army is a problem. And we're thinking, I thought governors is within their purview to ask for reinforcement when there's a breakdown of law and order, because this same military went to Alausa and they were there in Ikeja and there was no massacre there. So what happened? Who gave therefore the instruction, therefore, where in Ikeja, in tollgates, there was killing? So is it therefore fair to assume or to incriminate that, oh, it was the governor that gave that instruction? That's the gray area that I really need clarity on.
For me, the issue is that if you look at the Constitution, I started by highlighting that under Section 218 of the Constitution, the operational use of the armed forces is vested in the President. And Section 130 says the President shall be the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federation. If you also look at the Armed Forces Act, the president is also allowed to delegate his powers under the Constitution. In writing, yes, for the president to delegate, in writing.
Yes.
So people are now, and you see, the problem is that we are so used to abuse in Nigeria. Ordinarily, if everything had gone well on the 20th, we probably would not be having conversation on why the military was invited.
Yes.
Because governors invite the military to intervene in civilian affairs almost every day.
Exactly.
The Nigerian military is about the most abused in the world. They carry handbags of wives of politicians. They follow politicians to parties. They arrest husband and wife over disputes. The military goes to protect property. Right. The military does everything. The military goes to demolish. There's nothing the military. The military even regulates traffic in Nigeria. So this abuse of the military is something that we inherited from long years of military dictatorship. Now people are asking, what did the governor do wrong? I make a concession that there was violence, there was carnage, there was arson, which was condemnable, including the attack on your organization. These things cannot be tolerated. Yeah. But the point is that people are saying, given what transpired, because you rightly said the military was at Ikeja, why did they not shoot at people?
You were given the instruction.
I was at the panel of inquiry when General Bello testified. And one of the questions we asked him under court examination was that all the instances of violence that you cited as the basis for your intervention took place after 20th of October. Most of the politicians in Lagos were burnt after that day. Yeah, so what we are saying, I know the governor politically may not be very willing to say certain things, because do not forget he said it was beyond his control. So if he invited them, somebody gave, the military acts based on chain of command. Somebody told them open fire. And that person must be identified and put on trial. Beyond the invitation by the governor, the person who gave the order for them to open fire on civilians must be arrested and put on trial.
Okay, let me take this call from Philip when I come to Metokwe. Hello, Philip, are you still there? Hello, Philip. Okay, I think I lost that call. Go ahead, Tokwe.
Who are the people that can give...
Hello, Philip, are you there? Go ahead, Tokwe.
So, obviously, you already mentioned in the beginning of your conversation that we might not get any reply from the military perspective. Even the report mentioned how the request for the presence of specific military officers didn't show up. You know, so we might not, I think looking towards that angle might not be realistic for Nigerians. What would you say is a realistic expectation from Nigerians, number one? Number two, one of the core issues with EndSARS was a reform of the police force. And I believe that at the end of the day, we mustn't get distracted from what our goal was, which is to ensure that the police gets everything they need to help them be efficient in protecting us. We need them. So how do we translate from that anger of this is what happened in EndSARS to the point where we understand that we still need the police force in Nigeria? Is it decentralization? Is it just reforms? Is it state police? What would you say is the realistic approach for Nigerians to expect as a resolution for these issues?
Well, I don't want to be accused of being unnecessarily pessimistic, but I can tell you, Buhari will not implement the recommendations. The president will not implement the recommendations of this committee.
Wow. He
will not. History has shown he will not. The day the Buratai was appointed as the non-career ambassador, that was a clear message to Nigerians. So anybody who is expecting the chief of army staff to be fired, the minister of defense to be fired, or General Bello to be fired on court martial is wasting his time. Another government will implement it. Now regarding reform, it is another government will have to implement it. I don't have any confidence that this government will implement it. If you are saying that, because what we were talking about, look at what is happening. Have they stopped harassing people on the road? The answer is no.
Well, it seems the governor's hands are tied. The police don't report to him. He doesn't have access to the army. So what can the governor therefore do to demonstrate to the Nigerian people that they have seen this recommendation and this is what I want to do to quell your thoughts against this thing?
Every state, you know, people say governors have no control over the police. That is not totally correct. Under section 215 of the Constitution, the Constitution gives the governor of a state the power to give such lawful directives to the Commissioner of Police. And the Commissioner of Police is bound to obey, except that he may defer to Abuja. The question I've always asked is, because I had that conversation with the Commissioner of Information of Lagos, I said, cite one example where Governor Sanwo-Olu called Odumosu, the CP, and said, do this. And he said, sir, I want to seek clearance from the IG. So when governors say they don't control the police, they are being economical with the truth, because every state has security council presided over by the governor. That security council has the army, has the air force, has the police, all security agencies. There is also the Nigeria Police Council that we seldom talk about, comprising of all the governors in Nigeria. The police council is a very important body. So when it has to do with political intervention, arousing their opponents in Nigeria, governors don't complain about controlling the police. But I do agree that systematically, in terms of structure, it ultimately lies with the federal government. But let us not say, oh, they don't have any hand. How about security votes that every governor takes home monthly?
What do they do with it?
Don't they give this part of this money to the police? Let the governor start by withholding his allocation, his grants to the police. And tell them that in my state, anybody who is killed by the police, you lose your subvention for the month. Let a governor in Nigeria write a petition to the president.
So you're saying it's political will?
It's political will. Let governors stop making excuses. They have the power to regulate what the police does in their state.
Let me go on a quick break. We're going to go to the final lap of this conversation. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your view will be right back.
Thanks for staying with us. We're still discussing this report that Nigerians are talking about. Bisi, you had a question for the break.
Yes, so one of the panel's recommendations is that all the protesters who have been arrested over a year now should be released. That means that some people are still in custody and have not been released. That's one. But now that we're now having that feeling that these recommendations, even after the white paper, may not be, adhered to or implemented, what do we begin to do? Because I know that the U.S., on one hand, has said that they are waiting for the white paper recommendations too before they can move or do something. Do we now start looking to international organizations and civil societies to be on standby? Peradventure, this is just being swept under the carpet after this white paper.
I have some problem with our overdependence or reliance on international community in quotes. Because at the end of the day, the United States government will do what is in their strategic interest. Look at the selling of Tucano jets to Nigeria, for example. Some people were saying that because you have a military that is involved in killing of civilians, a military that has no respect for human rights, why are you selling military jets to Nigeria? But at the end of the day, the U.S. strategic interests demanded that they should do it. Now, I don't understand what the U.S. mean by they are waiting for the white paper. The recommendation is that the baby has already come out. The mother is no longer pregnant. Give a name to the baby. Those who did these things, they have been named. They are faces. What can the international community do? Very simple. Start with a visa ban. All those who were responsible, do not allow them access to your country. If there is something that the political class in this country is terrified of, it is denial of access to countries where they enjoy the things that they deprive us of here. Stop them from going to the UK. Stop them from going to America. You will see that people will sit up.
Right.
Freeze their assets. These are things that they can do. Very simple thing. But I don't want us to say that the recommendations cannot be implemented. Right. It is implementable. What is lacking is political will.
Okay.
And I have said we have the aspect of the Lagos State government.
We'll come to that. Let me join a few questions.
So on the other side, we had protesters who went out, who were burning down buildings, some police officers were killed. Some police officers were killed, and and I hear that some of these people are on trial already, and some police officers' families are being compensated. So wouldn't it be in the interest of the Lagos State government to make sure that on the other side of bringing to book those in uniform who also carried out some of in fact the reason why we're here, who carried out brutality and the shootings, to be prosecuted as well, since it's already done on the civilian side? Wouldn't it be in the interest of the governor to make sure that this is done, and it will give him credibility?
First, let me say I haven't seen evidence that the genuine EndSARS protesters, that I witnessed, because at some point I participated in that protest. There was a day that I was privileged to lead lawyers in Lagos to the Commissioner of Police office to protest. Somebody cannot say I burnt anybody's property or that I am a hoodlum. The genuine protesters were not involved in this carnage. Now, what we must realize is that there is a lack of culture of responsibility, of accountability in this country. I have told you that in 2018, the National Human Rights Commission indicted several police officers for killing Nigerians. None of them have been put on trial. This is despite the passage of the Anti-Torture Act under this government in 2017 that criminalized the torture of suspects in Nigeria. Now, let us wait and see, because they are saying, oh, white people, and all of us are talking about Lagos. There are 26 states in Nigeria. How many of those states have even submitted their reports? How many states have set out a certain amount of money as compensation apart from Lagos? How about the federal government? Osibanjo has not told us. The National Economic Council has not told us. When are they sending the supplementary budget to the National Assembly?
Based on what you're saying,
to compensate the victims.
Because based on what you're saying, there are three names that were mentioned in the recommendations. So we have Lieutenant Colonel S.O. Bello, Major General Godwin Umelo, that's from the Army. And from the police, we have the CSP Raji Ganiyu, who is the Divisional Police Officer at Maroko Police Station. These are people that, based on the recommendations, they're asking that they should indict or they should undergo disciplinary actions. But based on what you're saying that that might not be done because it comes from the federal government. But on the part of the Lagos state government, and I want us to have an open conversation here, a private company was indicted, the owners of the tollgate. Even some of the other, I'm trying to remember the other issue. What can the governor do, as I said, to demonstrate to Nigerians that the ones within my purview, I can carry out. The ones within my purview, I would ensure that we fix this so that at least Nigerians know, that Lagosians know that the governor of the state is ensuring that there is an implementation of part of the recommendation within his own purview.
In quick addition, before you answer that, I wanted to just, you hinted at it, but just to state clearly that Lagos State has paid compensation to the tune of 420 million to those that have not, those that were affected by the EndSARS protest. While we're still expecting many other states, they were even indicted at the anniversary that Oyo hasn't paid, Osun, Akwa Ibom, Benue, Ogun, Gombe, they haven't paid any compensation, despite the fact that they were also...
Lagos State has paid some compensation. So what else can they do at this point to show, to demonstrate that?
The governor can do a lot. Let us, as I said, we shouldn't be mistaken. Legally, the governor is constrained when it comes to the military and the police. He cannot sanction them. But these officers function and operate in his state. If I am the governor of Lagos State, if I cannot put those military officers on trial, I can at least send a memo to the president and say, these people are in my state. I do not want them to serve here anymore. That is if you don't want to sanction them. Now, LCC is not entirely a private company. LCC is a private company with a government interest. If you look at the history of LCC, it was a public-private partnership. The government had a serious stake in LCC. In fact, LCC is owned by the Lagos State government, even though it is registered as a private entity. So let us not say that the governor cannot do anything. LCC tried to cover up evidence, as found by the committee. Somebody switched off the lights. Has that person been fired? The answer is no. Those who went to clean the tollgate, those who went to clean the tollgate to tamper with evidence, have they been dissatisfied? Yeah. Have they been fired? Governor Sanwo-Olu can do these things. Because he has immunity, you cannot put the governor on trial. He can say, oh, I invited the military in good faith. But on account of that invitation, people lost their lives. You must apologize. Because if Nigeria were a serious country, by now you would have had litany of resignations. You will not wait for the president to say, I no longer need you. You will not wait for the governor to sanction. People would have tendered their resignation. The chief of army staff would have left office by now. The chief of army staff would have left office. Even the commissioner of police of Lagos State, he would have tendered his resignation in the US. When blacks are killed by the police, you find the heads of police in those states or localities resign voluntarily.
We don't know how to resign.
Why is the culture of resignation a strange thing to us? So let the governor implement those that are within his power.
All right, thank you very much,
thank you so
for sharing your thoughts on this. I think we have to wrap up on this. We'll look forward to the white paper. It's going to take about 2 weeks. And we know the governor of the state, Lagos State has demonstrated in good faith to constitute this panel of inquiry. And I mean, I'm also particularly impressed that they were independent enough to carry out this investigation. Because I remember I was telling somebody the other day, when I was a young girl, during the Babajide and Abacha regime. This was almost impossible. But thank God for democracy that these people were allowed to work independently. Now we have this report. The next steps is what we're waiting for, that the governor of Lagos State did show that, he in good faith that this committee was set up, will also have in good faith implementation of the white paper, which we're expecting in the next 2 weeks. Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. That's been my pleasure speaking with these powerful ladies.
That is all we can take on this segment. When we come back, move on to other topics. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your view will be right back.